Hey, everybody, this is Louie Lopez checking in from Jacksonville, Florida for the Daily Reflection Podcast. Because I was in and out of AA, I would get 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. I would have a sponsor. I would do the steps. But what I came to realize was I wasn't being accountable. And all those things are humility, being humble, being responsible. And so I wasn't being accountable.
Welcome to the Daily Reflection Podcast. My name is Michael Lynn from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
And I'm Lee McGinnis from Leesburg, Virginia.
As members of the recovery community, we created this podcast as a way to provide experience, strength, and hope through the lens of the Daily Reflection book. Each day, we interview members of the recovery community in the hope that their experience may provide inspiration.
We value inclusion and diversity, and we really want to provide a platform for all the voices of recovery. We aren't affiliated with any 12-step or recovery program, but you may hear these mentioned throughout the course of an interview.
Hey, before we get to the show, I'd like to ask a favor. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, it'd be great if you could leave us a comment or a rating. This is going to do a couple of things. It's going to help us expand our reach and improve the show.
We hope you enjoyed this episode.
Thanks so much to Jeff Bain, Frederick, Maryland, for editing services. Appreciate your help. Hey, Lee, what's on the agenda for today?
So today is April 28th, and we have Louie Lopez in the studio with us today. He's from Jacksonville, Florida, and he's going to speak to us on today's daily reflection, which is 2 magnificent standards.
Oh, fantastic. Louie, welcome to the show. It's great to have you back on the podcast.
Thank you, Mike. I remember the first time I did it. Actually, it was the very first one on January the 1st, and I was all uptight because I wanted to be perfect, as we always do with alcoholics. If it's not perfect, I don't want to do it. But it wasn't quite like that. It's more about service work. And so I was excited to do it. And yes, part of my ego was excited to be the very first one. And my ego side loved it that you asked me to be the first one. And at the same time, I was very humbled by it. So thank you. And thank you, Lee, for joining on and all the work you're doing in helping Mike. It's obviously a 2+ people job.
It's an honor.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for agreeing to do it. So as you know, we get started in the same way every day. We ask the guest to read the daily reflection for the day. So Louie, would you get us started and read?
Absolutely. So this is the daily reflection for April 28th. 2 magnificent standards. All AA progress can be reckoned in terms of just 2 words, humility and responsibility. Our whole spiritual development can be accurately measured by our degree of adherence to these magnificent standards. As Bill sees it, page 271. To acknowledge and respect the views, accomplishments, and prerogatives of others and to accept being wrong shows me the way of humility. To practice the principles of AA in all of my affairs guides me to be responsible. Honoring these precepts gives credence to tradition 4 and to all other traditions of the fellowship. Alcoholics Anonymous has evolved a philosophy of life full of valid motivations, rich in highly relevant principles and ethical values. A view of life which can be extended beyond the confines of the alcoholic population. To honor these precepts, I need only to pray and care for my fellow man as if each one were my brother. Thank you.
Nice. Thank you for reading. Before we get started, Louie, what's your sobriety date?
My sobriety date is January 15th, 1987. And if I may, I'd like the reading addressed Tradition 4, and just to remind our listeners, Tradition 4 says each group should be autonomous except in matters of affecting others or AA as a whole. Boy, I butchered that
Excellent.
too.
Thank you. As we read the daily reflection, the first part from out of As Bill Sees It on page 271, it says all AA progress can be reckoned in terms of just 2 words, humility and responsibility. And maybe you can kick us off by talking about those 2 words, but in relation to where you were before you got into recovery. Like, were those words in your vocabulary? Were they words you practiced before you got into recovery?
I don't think any alcoholic coming in, looking for a solution has on their vocabulary: humility and responsibility. I mean, I think as a whole, we're all irresponsible. I know I personally knew step one before I set foot in the rooms of AA. I knew that my life was unmanageable, and I knew that I was powerless over alcohol. So I first came to AA as a 19-year-old kid, and I was a jockey. And I was 12 step by a horse trainer who I thought I needed to go to church. And so once he heard my story, the gentleman said, "Kid, you don't have a church problem. You have a drinking problem. You need to go to AA." So as a jockey, I was raised to be the farthest thing from being humble. It was always, you got to be cocky, you got to be aggressive, it's competitive, you got to show them you're better than they are. I mean, you don't have to be an alcoholic. It's almost like, as an alcoholic, I didn't need to hear those things. It just made whatever I already had of that worse. It was like putting a match to kindle. It just cocky. Oh, I can be cocky. Better than the other riders? Of course I am. And I'll let them know too, in case they don't remember. I once had before I started riding races, I was already training by learning to exercise horses. And I remember I was already super cocky and arrogant, and they would pump that into me all the time. And I remember I was trying to go out with this girl, and she says, "I don't want to go out with you. How do you get that head inside of that car, or inside of your car?" And it's just like, oh my God, how can you say that? I'm a nice guy. And she says, "No, you're egotistical and full of fear. I can see right through you." And I was like, oh my God, I wasn't even in AA yet, but she might as well slap me, because it really cut deep. And obviously I still remember that day when this girl said that to me. So that's where humility and responsibility were going. And responsibility, I was not responsible at all. I was just living by the flying by the seat of my pants, like they like to say.
Okay, so it was clear that you lacked humility, and actually in your line of work, it probably would have worked against you. And that's, I understand that. What led you to believe that you needed a solution to your drinking problem?
Mike, I think I was 6 years old when I knew what alcoholism was. My favorite uncle died of cirrhosis of the liver. And I remember being at the funeral and asking, what happened to him? What happened? What happened to Uncle Ramon? And they said, he died of cirrhosis. And I'm like, well, what is that? I mean, how are you going to tell a kid that? And I'm like, well, what is that? And they said he drank too much. And I knew he drank too much. And my grandfather drank too much. And so I kind of thought it was almost like a badge of honor that I was going to carry on, proud alcoholics and following the traditions. But to my parents' credit, they were loving, and they did teach me right from wrong. And so it was like something didn't feel right, in the sense that the powerlessness. So I was already 17 when I started drinking at the age of 16. I started drugging at the age of 12. But at the age of 16, 17, it didn't take long where my drinking started getting out of hand. I was drinking in the morning every day. And keep in mind, I wasn't living at home now. I was sent to a training center to learn to ride racehorses. So I'm on my own. So I'm drinking in the morning, exercising horses. At 10:30, 11, I'd smoke some marijuana. Then I'd go to high school in the afternoon, and that was my day. Next day, I'd do it again. There was nobody to say no. And as time went on, that got worse, because then I developed some talent. But I'm going to say when I was 17, I was like, this is not right. I just needed to get my act together. I felt like I didn't have my act together. And that really, really bothered me. And I would see some guys that seemed like they had their act together. And I would ask them, tell me, what do you do? What do you do? It seems like you've got your act together. There's something about you. And this particular guy, he told me that he was doing transcendental meditation. So in talking about humility and humbling yourself, he says, you ought to try it. And I thought, yeah, that sounds great. Because I think like I'm drinking too much, I'm smoking too much weed. And he said, yeah, try it out. So what do I have to do? He says, well, first you have to do some things. Oh, like what? Well, you have to watch your diet. You need to cut meat out of your diet. And that immediately, it was like the wall shut down. Boom. I'm like, stop eating meat. This guy's crazy. So that went out, but I still didn't have my act together. And so it was like I was looking for something, how can I get my act together? And really, it wasn't even getting my act together. It was just that I lacked self-confidence. I lacked, felt like the fraud that we talk about. And so I had this front, right? We talk about the chameleon that we become. And, I was very aware of being that chameleon in different settings, whether it be the people with the money, racetrack people, etc., other riders. And so there was this front of where I am just, it's just this whole other persona that I became. And I made it as I went along. And so, being humble was, not even in something I could comprehend at the time if you would have told me something about it, because my mindset was elsewhere, was to get ahead, was to win, to show you that I'm not afraid, when I was full of fear the whole time. That's where drugs and alcohol came into play. It just made that worse and worse and worse. So it's almost like where we're learning about humility and responsibility, as we read, it was like I was headed in the other direction and I was feeding it. And that was getting bigger, being irresponsible, letting others take care of things, being the egomaniac, the braggart, but it's just a front. It's just a complete front.
It's interesting. What I hear you saying is your insides didn't match your outsides, and you were fully aware. For some, they never get the concept that there's a disconnect, and they kind of live in denial for a long time. So that probably got you in a lot sooner maybe than others get in. So you said that the trainer, I believe, told you that you didn't have a church problem, you had an alcohol problem.
Correct.
Is that what got you into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, or what's
this? Yeah, the seed was planted then, but it didn't take for the next 5.5, almost 6 years. So I got a DUI in Long Branch, New Jersey, coming back from Mammoth, I think in September of 81. And I got sober in January of 87. So, it's 5.5 for a little over 5 years, whatever. And it took that long for the reservation to be smashed. I call it trying to beat the system. And we see it all the time. I came in with all the answers. I came in with all my solutions, when in reality, as you perfectly stated, the inside didn't match the outside. In 1983, I put myself through rehab and paid out of pocket. Didn't want the insurance company to know, when people were already aware of my usage. And the therapist said, he asked me a question regarding feelings. And he said, well, what did that feel like? And nobody had ever asked me that before. I was like, what do you mean? How did that feel like inside? And so I was looking for something, like for a physical object or something. And I said, I don't know, a knot on my throat or something. But I remember that was the first time that I actually tried to see what I was feeling, because it was just, oh, let's just do the next thing. It's just really the definition of being unconscious. The other thing that happened during that period was, once I got sober in 1987, I did a review because I was in and out of AA. I would get 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. I would have a sponsor. I would do the steps. But what I came to realize was I wasn't being accountable. And all those things are humility, being humble, being responsible. And so I wasn't being accountable. And all that meant was to let you know where I was, let you know what it is, because we live in such a culture of being shamed of, oh, you're not good enough. Oh, you're doing that. How could you do that? All those things really, I played into them. And so I couldn't let anybody know, oh, I've been molested, or, oh, I can't talk about this stuff. So I would do 4 steps and I would skip that whole part. Let's pick up from over here and we'll just skip this part. And let's skip this other part. And let's skip this and let's skip that. And all the things that created tremendous amount of shame. The 12 and 12 talks about it. Some of these secrets we're going to take to our grave. I mean, it was like we live it without even ever coming into AA. We've already got this set of ideas as to how we're going to control the situation. And the very thing that was killing me, in a sense, that was forcing me to drink, to run away, was the thing I was protecting the most.
So fast forward, you're sober 34 years, I think?
Yes.
34 years. And how have humility and responsibility shown up for you today? What does that look like today?
So it really is the same thing. And the reading talked about service work, passing the message on to others, and to being honest. There's a line in the 12 and 12 that says, someday we will want to grow in character. And to me, what that means is that I want to grow in doing the right thing. There really is no gray area. When I used to say there was gray areas, that's so I could give myself wiggle room to do whatever it was that I wanted to do. But there really is no gray area. There really is right and there's wrong. And it's not my right and wrong could be different than your right and wrong. So it's not like oh, well, because I'm doing this, I'm going to point the finger at you and how can you do that? No, that's your life. You're on your own journey. And so as far as I'm concerned, the thing that I discovered in that first year, 2 things happened. Number one, I told myself, no matter what happens, I am not going to drink. And I had done a 5th step when I was in treatment that last time. The relief was so huge just to unload everything that I literally felt lighter. I ran out of that office. I ran out and I jumped into the air and I felt like I flew like 50 feet in the air, just flew. And I was light. And at that moment, I thought, I don't have to drink again. I don't have to drink again. And of course, things happened. And in 34 years, I'm going to say there have been 3 instances where I considered drinking or came close to drinking. But I will say of the 3, the first one was in year 1. And it was only because of I wrecked a car and I was so frustrated. I was still thinking in the old way that drinking is a solution. But my higher power intervened. I pulled up to the liquor store and I sat there for a minute. And then this thought popped into my head. And the thought said, how about if you don't drink tonight and in the morning you can go to a 6 a.m. meeting in LA? I was in LA and I did that. I went home, I went to sleep, I woke up and that feeling was gone. And I went to a meeting and I'm still here today. The other 2 instances were because of good fortune. Things were going good. And you talk about humility. It wasn't so much that I was being humble. It was more like my ego was getting out of control. And suddenly I found myself in party type situations. You know, people are offering me drinks and and all of a sudden I felt like I wasn't part of the crowd. And so I came close to drinking, but I left. I told a friend of mine that knew I was in the program. I said, I need to get out of here or I'm going to drink right now. And my friend says, we've got to get you out of here. And he did, and I walked out of there shaking like a leaf. For me, the only way I can keep this thing is to give it away. And so I was raised in AA in the era of where you don't say no. Of course, we have other obligations and within reason or what have you. But I promise you, 9 out of 10 times when I'm asked to do something, I try to be there. When my phone rings, if I think it's an alcoholic, I'll try to pick up. Whatever the situation. If somebody asks me to go to a meeting with them, I'll say yes. Or to meet them at a meeting. A lot of times sponsors or guys that are thinking about asking me to be sponsored, they'll say, hey, will you meet me at this meeting? And I'll say yes, and I'll show up, and they won't be there. And there was a time where that used to kind of upset me. I'm like, what the heck? I'm here for these people, right? But no, I turned that around, and today I look at it as they got me to a meeting, and I thank them for it. To help as many as I can. That's my objective today. You know, I could say, so we just came back from vacation down in Costa Rica, and as a Latin man, I had people ask me if I was Ecuadorian, if I was Colombian, if I was Peruvian. I think maybe one person asked if I was Mexican, but everybody else was asking if I was Central American, South American, and I'd say no, and I'd smile, you know, and next thing you know, my buddy was saying, we're just going to call you Mr. United Nations man, because all these people are thinking you're from their country. And you know, that's my gift. And I want to help others. And I can't keep it. I can't, the secrets. I was able to get past sex issues because I heard some guy at a meeting describe why he came to AA. And I was so blown away that he just put it out there. The power of example that we get in this fellowship. Also what I think that part of the reading addresses too. Power of example just helps us, shows us that we can do it also. And that's the attraction. And that's humbling.
I love what you've shared. Thank you for sharing all of that. And you did mention at one point that when you completed your 5th step with your sponsor and you jumped up into the air and you felt so light. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and maybe the other benefits of recovery for people that might be new, that are listening right now. You've got a lot of years, but what kind of advice or insight can you offer as far as the benefits of this amazing program that we're given?
So like I said early on, I was like everybody else. I came in thinking I knew what I needed to do. I mean, even before I got to AA, I was telling this trainer I need to go to church when I was an alcoholic. And I think that's a common thing for everybody. It's like, well, they don't know me like I know me. No, but maybe we've been through your situation. Oh, my wife's about to leave me. Well, we've got a bunch of people in AA whose wives are about to leave their husbands, and they're staying sober. I lost my job. We've got tons of people. I've lost job. I've been fired in AA. I've been promoted. But going back to humility, I think being humble is following the instructions and then seeing the change occur. But it's so gradual that we don't see it until maybe you encounter a situation that really used to give you a hard time or really upset you, or a person that would really get under your skin, but now you're having a conversation with as a result of changing how you look at things. And the change comes as a result of doing the steps. And so, yes, there are 12 steps. And yes, it takes time to do them. But it's important to take your time and be kind, patient with yourself, and find a sponsor that has done the steps that can walk you through it. I recently was at a meeting and I heard this young lady say, she heard this other woman share, but this young lady said, "Oh my God, I can't believe everything you just said. I want everything that you have." That is the first time I felt that. And that's what happens. We keep your eyes open, see how you relate to other people. See how the things, maybe situational, or maybe the feelings. People are talking about a certain feeling. You're like, I felt that, or I feel like that, but I've never been able to verbalize it. Or maybe you've done things but somebody's talking about it at a meeting and everybody's laughing. Yet you're thinking, wait a minute, I didn't even want to tell anybody I've done that because I thought it made me the worst of the worst. But then you're hearing somebody who did it 3 times, or who did it longer, or who did it higher or lower, whatever it is. We're not the end all to end all. There are other people in this fellowship that have done whatever it is that you have done, whatever experience you've done. I was told early on that if I continue to come to meetings and if I stay sober, someday I'll walk into a meeting and there'll be a speaker up there and they'll tell my story. And I've had that happen. Of course, it wasn't somebody that said, oh, I was a jockey and there's you know what I mean? All this other stuff. But just the feelings, how I felt, things that I did, the hurt that I created. I was able to get past all that. My father's 91, and right now, since my mom recently passed away, I've been really conscientious of, I call it a living amend to my father. And I was talking about that at a meeting the other day. And one of my old sponsors was at this meeting, and he said, you know, I've known Louie for over 30 years. And he said he's doing a living and amend. But the reality is, in the 30 plus years that I've known him, he's always been a good son. And so that's what we bring in recovery. We're different people. You know, we become the people we always thought about becoming. Then I stopped and thought about, well, when was I the bad guy, the bad son? Well, really, it was when I was a teenager. And then I left home at 16, and my parents never really saw me drink, maybe briefly, but not a whole lot. That was humbling too, to see that today I am a good son. And I've been a great son the whole time I've been sober. You know, I behave. I think since I've been around my father here in the last few months, he's told me at least 4 times what a great son I am to him. And I'm not saying that to brag about it or none of that. It's just like, as opposed to my mother telling me when I was still drinking, please stop telling me you're sorry. It means nothing anymore. We come a long way, and but we do become free from that prison that we came in with, of the feelings, emotions, the guilts, the shames, and we become free of it. And then we can focus on helping others that need it.
So powerful. Louie, as we begin to wrap, is there anything else that you want the audience to hear before we end?
Thank you. No, I actually thank you both for all your service work. This is great. I love you both. Lee, I've never met you in person. I'm sure we will. Mike's a dear friend of mine, and I'm just grateful that I can call him my friend. I really am. That's my heart's filled today. And going back to humility and being humble, it humbles me to have these people that I really admire for who they are, you know, and just to watch them, and I continue to learn, and it's an ongoing thing. You know, I'm still growing. I'm still getting past my self-rejection thing and all these misconceptions that I have about myself and the warped lenses that I viewed myself through. That's an ongoing thing, and the work continues. But I have friends that tell me, no, that's not who we see, you know. By the same token, there's the same friends that say, hey, what are you doing? You're kind of acting like a butt. So that's why we're all here. So this is good. Thank you both again, and thank you for this opportunity, and peace be with you, I guess.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Louie.
Thanks for doing it.
Thanks so much for listening. If you want to find us online, you can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/Daily Reflection Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Daily Reflector. You can read stories of recovery from our community at blog.dailyreflectionpodcast.com. Please don't forget to give us a rating on your podcast app. We greatly appreciate it. This podcast was produced by Lee McGinnis and Michael Lynn. Editing services by Jeff Bain.